Nicole, should we wait just a couple minutes before we get started or just jump right in?
Oh yeah, might have some people hopping on.
Yeah, it usually takes a couple minutes. So we'll go live and then typically it might take 2 or 3 minutes for folks to kind of hop on and join. Um,
Yep, you're live.
we'll go live and then that was my phone as I was trying to be newsy and go into Facebook.
Typically, too, don't worry. We're all guilty.
So yes, you are live. We can give it a few more minutes for people to join, and then you can take it away.
Sounds good.
Nicole, let us know.
All right. Welcome everyone to Dialogue with Deb. We are here with our amazing executive director, Julie Avalos, and our even more phenomenal state representative, Jennifer O'Mara. So we're excited to be featuring Representative O'Mara for our Survivors September. So please share, join in, share, host a watch party, tag individuals you know who will really appreciate this conversation. And we are looking forward to hearing more about our featured survivor this evening.
It's great to be here tonight.
Thank you.
Been a long week and it's only Tuesday.
I know. Well, it's been a long 6 or 7 months.
I know.
And, 2020 has been, I think, quite the roller coaster ride for so many.
The year that won't end.
The year that will not end. Yeah. So, keep hope alive and pray for a better 2021.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yes, I think so. I think that oftentimes we can get caught in the space of thinking like what else can go wrong. And I think oftentimes if we put ourselves in a space where we kind of shift that mindset to say it can only go up from here, we can change the universe.
It's true.
All right, Julie, if you're ready, take it away.
I'm ready. Well, good evening, everybody out there. Thank you all for joining us for Dine with DAP. As you know, we've been the last couple months having these Facebook Live sessions on Tuesday, and really have had such an amazing opportunity to bring an array of different topics to the forefront, and knowing that despite what's happening with COVID, DAP remains super committed to ensuring that we're getting information out there and ensuring that we're reaching communities, we're letting them know who we are, what we do, and the fact that we are here. And we continue to ensure that services are available and that they're accessible, and ensuring that we're getting information to the community about how to access the services that we provide. So again, I thank you all for joining us. My name is Julie Avalos. I'm the Executive Director of the Domestic Abuse Project of Delaware County. And I'm super excited to be here today on this Tuesday evening, as throughout September, you all may know that we've been hosting Survivor September. And what that means is we've been every week highlighting a new warrior who is filled with resilience and passion and is just the epitome of what it means to be resilient and to survive. And I have to say that I am beyond honored to have our state representative, Jennifer O'Mara, with us this evening. We welcome you, Jen.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's always a pleasure to be with you ladies.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say, so, I started at DAP a little bit more than a year ago in July of 2020. And one of the first things that I did was to reach out with some key individuals and leaders within our area to both introduce myself, but also reintroduce the organization and who we are and what we stand for. And I'll never forget the first time that I was able to meet with you, State Rep Jen O'Mara. I was just in awe of just your tenacity, of your trailblazing self to really be what it is and be an example of what a true advocate is for all your constituents. And I'm a Springfield resident, so I'm a proud constituent of yours myself.
I remember that meeting too. Feelings were mutual. There's
yeah,
like was like, oh, I can't wait to work with you. This is going to be exciting.
Absolutely. And, I think one thing that I walked away from as well is your willingness to say, I am a survivor. And in our first meeting with you, my first meeting with you, you said, I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor. And if you have a platform for me to be able to share my experience, I'm happy to do so.
Yes, the first
And
time I think I ever really have talked about it in this kind of in my role. You know what I mean? So,
I think I walked away and saying, wow, what an example. And especially as we've been trying to do for Survivor September, really dispelling those myths of the fact that oftentimes people think it's a certain type of individual that gets in these quote unquote situations. It's a certain class of individual, or it's a certain race of individual, and we've been really trying to highlight the fact that domestic violence is something that runs across the gamut, regardless of socioeconomic status, of of race, of gender, of the fact that there's so many individuals who have been touched by this, and we know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been impacted. So the fact that you're willing to be with us tonight just is, I think, another great example of the fact that there's so many resilient individuals out there. So again, I thank you for joining us. And I'd love to start just by, introduce yourself. And if you want to just begin to share kind of what your own journey is or
sure.
was.
Thank you. So I'm Jennifer O'Mara. I'm now a state representative in Delaware County, which still feels sometimes odd for me to say because I was elected when I was 28 and I was one of the youngest women ever elected to the House. And I really this wasn't in the cards for me. And if I think about where I was even in 2014, I would think this was impossible. But I got elected in 2018 and I'm almost on my first term. And I have decided, so when I first decided to run, I really never talked about the things that happened to me in the past because I don't know, you know how these things go, you tend to hide them. But I've realized as I've been out there sharing with folks, and I talk about whole different aspects of my life, but I realize we all have many of these things in common, and you never know who you're going to impact when you share your story. And so I've decided to do that. So I've originally, I started by telling people about my dad. I mentioned my dad died from suicide when I was young, but I often leave out the fact that my dad was also an abusive man to my mother, and they were separated at the time when he died because of that. My mom took her a long time to finally get the courage to walk away, but she finally did, and I think that had a lot to do with the fact that I was growing up and watching this in her house. And I have a lot of weird feelings now about my dad because he was even abusive to me. And I think because of that, mainly verbally, and I want to be clear, domestic abuse takes more than the form of physical violence. And my dad was verbally abusive. And he used to talk about my weight and just say things about me that just to his child that weren't appropriate, but also gave me a lot of issues. So I think though, seeing that experience as a kid made me think it was okay when it started to happen to me. So I want to be clear, the experiences that I'm sharing are not about my husband. Many people know my husband, Brad. Brad is a wonderful man. We met after all of this, and luckily he was there and helped me serious at the end, sort of at the end of all of it. But I was with a guy, started dating him in high school. We ended up being together in college. We were long distance for a while. Then we ended up, he came to the college I went to. We ended up living together. And I thought when we started fighting really bad, it was just because like we were 21 and we started drinking and going out to bars, and you'd come back, and I thought explosive fights where he would punch holes in the wall were normal. And then I started to have, my friends would say things to me like, this isn't normal, this isn't okay. I lost friends over it because I would defend the guy and not listen to anyone. So we're done college. I'm a young professional trying to make my way. I was working at Penn and a few other jobs, and I was in graduate school, and I kind of like threw myself into myself, and I didn't think about the fact that my relationship was so bad. But it got to be normal to get yelled at and cursed at and to feel scared, like get yelled at in my face, like, it never crossed the line of hitting me. So I didn't think it was abuse because it was just verbal. And I didn't talk to anyone about it because I think a part of me was ashamed. Another part of me wanted to prove I knew my mom didn't like him, but I didn't want to prove her right. And so I never wanted to tell her about any of that, which now I realize is so dumb and I should have just talked to my mom, but bullheaded girls in their 20s. What do we know? And so then after we were together for 7 years and we had horrible fights and I like ran out of ways to cover holes in the wall with different paintings and tapestries and stuff. Then he told me he was addicted to substances. And so suddenly the behavior had an excuse. And now I wanted to protect him because he was sick and I needed to help him get better. And so I helped him get into rehab, and that became a whole new fiasco because it led to relapses and back to rehab and stealing from me. That started. That was great. But finally it crossed the line one day, and he choked me in the bathroom in the shower against the wall. And I'm not a little girl, so I was able to get him off me. And I called the police. And when I called the police, he ran out of the house and he stole my car. And by the time he got there, I had convinced myself that I needed to protect him again. I don't know what it was. It was I loved him, so I didn't want to see him end up in jail. And if I told him that he choked me and had a knife, like a butter knife, granted, but still a knife in his hand, that would have been a big, he would have ended up in jail. So I hid it again, and I made it more about the drugs and the rehab when the cops got there. And I told him about my car, and they got it. They found him, stopped him, whatever. But it finally just, I don't know, like something hit me one day, not him again, but I was, one night he didn't come home and I didn't know where he was. And money had gone missing out of my bank account. And I'm thinking about this like incident that had happened a week ago. And I just finally decided, I don't know, something just clicked. Like I couldn't do this. I saw what happened to my mom. I knew it took her a long time to get out of it. I was getting older. I want to get married and have kids. I knew that couldn't be the person I did that with. And so I finally threw him out. And that wasn't easy, but it happened. And at that point, I started to talk to folks about it. I talked to my family finally. I kind of told my coworkers. My close friends had sort of figured out what was going on and they were there to help me. And I met Brad sort of in that time by accident. It was like you never planned to meet the person you're going to fall in love and marry, right? But I did. And he was so wonderful and such the opposite. And I could totally see how and why what I accepted for so long was so wrong. But Brad was like really pivotal in teaching me how to look out for, literally physically check for my surroundings, like, because he was afraid that when my ex found out that I moved on, that something bad would happen. And we knew my ex owned a firearm and it was always looming in the back of our minds. He had previously, before, like when I broke up with him, threatened to use it against him to harm himself, which was a very horrible thing for him to do, to say to me of all people, which he did intentionally. He is since now, I hope, I haven't seen him in years. I hope he's doing well. So I hope everyone knows I don't villainize the person that did all this to me. But Brad was with me when he did find out and he started stalking me. And so there actually ended up being an incident where I lived in, I didn't live in Philadelphia. I lived outside of Philadelphia, but I worked in Philadelphia. So he showed up at my work and was there when I left and like followed me to the train station one day, the 30th Street station. And I worked at Penn. So I'm out in the city on a main busy streets. So I was with it enough to call a cop that I was friends with and put him on speakerphone so he could hear what was going on. And he ended up having a police officer sent to the train station because, like I said, like, oh, I'm walking to, heading to 30th Street. What are you gonna do? X, like, said his name. So kind of placed myself physically in by talking on the phone that way, and then let him know who was with me and that kind of thing. So the cops ended up coming. But Brad was freaking out about it. He was like, our worst fears had finally came true. So at that point I moved. I changed, blocked phone numbers, blocked people on social media, and tried to just separate myself as much as possible from the person. Because at this point I'd been out of it, and I knew for that person to actually go get help, I needed to be away. So it was, I think all in all, the experience was 2 years before, like when it got really bad, to the time when I got him finally out of my life. And then there was this, when I decided to run, I was always afraid that all of this would come back and somehow hurt me in my new life. So I decided, instead of hiding, I would just talk about it and let people know that this happens to women all the time. It's sometimes men, usually women. And it's more common than we realize, and we accept more than we should, in the way we allow people to treat us. And so I also feel like if I talk about it, I can, like, maybe you'll hear something I said and think, oh, that happens to me too, and that isn't okay. Because it really took, Brad was the first time I had a really healthy, I mean, I didn't have date a lot of guys, so I've had like 3 boyfriends, but because I was with one for so long. But Brad ended up showing me what a healthy relationship could be in so many ways. And so it's just, I wish I knew so much more now than I did when I was in my early 20s, but it was hard lessons to learn, but important ones. And hopefully one day I'll have my own kids and can teach them how to not, how to be in healthy relationships, and really how to accept healthy behavior, because that's what it comes down to. I think for me, that was the big struggle, and that was something that I had to reckon with myself. So I know you have questions, so I will stop talking so you can ask me questions.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. I think, it's not an easy thing to put it out there like that. So it takes a lot of just bravery. And again, I use the word resilience because I love to see strong, resilient women who really rise to the occasion, and, and especially use a platform to support others who may be going through stuff that are very, very similar, and think there's no, way out on the other side. So a couple things I heard that were really kind of key as you were telling your story, that we oftentimes hear from so many of the survivors that we work with, is that, individuals, they don't want, they love their partners. And even if there is, abuse, whether it's verbal, physical, emotional, financial, etc., that's happening, oftentimes, a victim just wants the abuse to stop and doesn't necessarily want to stop loving that person. So that's something very, very common. And oftentimes I think, makes it difficult for somebody to kind of really accept what's happening with them. The other thing that's, really striking is, in your story, I heard what kind of resides with other survivors is, statistics say it takes up to 7 times for an individual to leave before they finally say, I'm done.
I didn't realize that.
Yes, up to 7 times. So really leaving and going back, and leaving and going back. And, we see this throughout, the individuals that we work with too. And oftentimes we do know that's part of the process, along with that, with the fact that individuals go back at least 7 times before they leave. We also know that studies and statistics show us that the 3-month period post leaving an abusive relationship, an individual is at the highest risk for homicide. Oh. So the fact is that individuals oftentimes go back because they know and can feel the own safety risks that, that are impacting them, as well as the fact that, along the lines of they just want the abuse to stop, but they still love that person.
Mm-hmm. And you think that I mean, maybe it was just me thinking this, but that it wasn't me. It was like the person had something wrong with them, and they, if we could just get them help, it would stop. But they're never going to accept that there's something wrong. And I don't know. It's not that it was me, but it's the person has to have, like, they have to lift their own veil, if you will, and that's not going to happen unless they have some beautiful coming to Jesus moment that no one's expecting, you know. So
Absolutely. Well, I think that domestic violence is all about power and control.
mhm.
And it is all about power and control. And that power and control is a very manipulative way to really minimize the behavior, to push blame on the other person, and really put the other person in a place where they feel like they need to take care of or make excuses of. Oftentimes I also heard you speak about, drug and alcohol use, and how that kind of became okay. Well, if someone's using drugs and alcohol, that can be a reason as to why their behavior is like this. But we know that there's lots of people that use drug and alcohol and they don't necessarily abuse their partners. So that can oftentimes come in as an excuse for the behavior, but it really is not necessarily a cause and effect. But I'm wondering, just like through early on, if you were to look back, were there specific red flags that you saw even before the relationship got really bad?
Yeah, definitely. And I just didn't see them, or I chose not to see them. But there were both, when we first started dating, there were a couple of things that were said to me that made me think like, oh, this might not be the best path for me to head down. And then there were a couple of things that were done pretty early on when we were dating that should have opened my eyes. But I sort of went back, like you mentioned, like once you just said the 7 times, I'm starting to think, how many times did we break up and get back together? And I really think that led to, um, I think that contributed to it. And the other thing you said that made me realize that was happening too is the power and control. Like that was definitely a thing, because especially I've always been um a go-getter, if you will. So there was a part of it that was like trying to contain, I think. But like when I mentioned my mom and having a bad relationship with her, I only had that bad relationship with her when I was in that relationship. And it's because I was always hearing about my mom in the other ear, and how bad she was and how bad she was for me. It was sort of like he intentionally isolated me from my family. And I have a very close knit family, so he kind of made me like, it was like me versus them.
Yeah, which is so common. We have, one of the things that individuals are going to be more successful and more resilient when they have a strong safety net around them. So, perpetrators, as a part of their power and control tactics, will slowly strip away the safety net, knowing that that's going to leave an individual more vulnerable. And it's also going to leave an individual more dependent
On
on
that.
them.
Yeah.
So during that time, did you end up having any individuals, whether it was friends or family members or coworkers, that were kind of in your corner and that you were able to get any type of support or confide in at all?
Yeah. I always had, and she's still someone I can call at the drop of a hat. She's now a nurse too, so now I call her with everything. Like, there's this thing, what's wrong with me? But I always had a good friend that we were friends in college. We actually went to high school, like high school through college together. So she knew me, she knew the person as well. So it was a good, she knew who I was talking about, and she always picked my side. So she was always there. And I had a couple good girlfriends. And I remember like when that night I finally threw them out, one of them was like there that night, the next day, with food to make sure I was okay. But they didn't really know about everything that was going on. I was really good at hiding it and isolating myself from issues that that were going on in whom, I guess I would say. So it was a little bit of a surprise, I think, when I kind of came out and told everyone what was going on.
So, like, what was the reaction of those when you finally kind of got to a point where you spoke to those around you about what was happening? Did it seem like they were aware and didn't say anything, or do you feel like they were?
I got I got the feeling that from my family that they probably were aware and didn't say anything, so there was a little bit of a guilt there. But it was more like, well, we wanted to, but you would have been mad at us. Um, and so that kind of bugs me. I got, though, from some of my friends, they were very apologetic because they were like, we should have seen what was going on and we didn't. And so I had some people being like apologizing, and I didn't feel like they owed me an apology. So I was like, please stop it. You're not the people that owe me anything right now. But I was surprised by that.
And another question I have is just around your ex-partner. Were you aware, did you find out about, like, was there any history of previous relationships with violence or his own experience with domestic violence?
No, and I mean, I was pretty open with his family about what happened, like what happened after it happened, because they got him, they needed to take over, if you will. Um, they said that there was no abuse between his family and him. There was no, at least that we know of, issue with his old relationships, but he was always an angry person. And they said he would lose it a lot, like yell and break stuff and throw stuff in his house. And it was always like yelling in his bedroom kind of anger. And they didn't know where it came from. So looking back, I mean, it's probably undiagnosed mental health issues, which is another reason I am so passionate about mental health, because I think so often it's undiagnosed mental health issues that lead to domestic abuse, that lead to substance abuse, that lead to suicide, that lead to so many larger issues. And so I really think had he gotten help, like I almost want to say to his parents, like, so you watched your son grow up yelling and angry in the house and you never did anything about it. You never had him get treatment. You never had him go to therapy. You never talked to his guidance counselor. Like I felt like there was a little bit of a ball dropped when he was young, and it led to these issues that were just never handled. He also was in a car accident when he was 16, and it was a bad car accident, and he was an athlete that suddenly lost all of his scholarships went away, and I believe he was put on opioids at a very young age, and I think that also contributed to. So I mean, like I said, I don't villainize this person because I truly think that there were just bad circumstances that led to, and I'm sure that there were I reacted with anger plenty of times to make situations worse in the moment. So there's a lot of things I would have done differently looking back now.
Yeah. So I guess another question I have is, when you think about that period, were there any resources or agencies that you reached out with or reached out to get any type of support or services?
So there weren't, and I don't know if it was because I didn't know if there about them, or if I just intentionally didn't seek anything out. I worked at Penn, I mentioned, I think, and Penn did have a benefit for their employees to get counseling. So I remember I did call and take advantage of that at one point, and I went to a couple counseling sessions, and I think I ended up continuing that for a little bit. So that's not true. I did individual therapy. But I didn't reach out to any organizations, but I did try. So after the incident where he showed up at my work, I did try to get a PFA in the county that I lived in. And I was not able to because he didn't stalk me in the county that I was living in. It was in Philadelphia. And I had no record of anything. And they said, like, had I reported that first when I called the police and he came to my house, like, had I reported violence that day, I probably would have been easier to do. And I remember when I called the police, and I'm not like naming it because I don't want to put any departments under, you know what I mean? So Brad was with me though, and he was standing behind me, and he was pissed when the cop left, way more mad than I was. And I was like, what? He's like, this is ridiculous. Like, we all know this happened. He stalked you and you can get a PFA. This is BS. And he's like yelling. I'm like, calm down, Brad. Like, that's the way the world works. I didn't report it right. It's my fault. He's like, it's not your fault. And he was like screaming. So it was funny to see him react that way. he's a man, I guess he's not used to that sort of stuff. Because he said the cop was talking down to me and all that. I don't know if he was or not. I think he was just doing his job. But it was just really funny seeing him react that way and seeing how angry he was. And I was just sort of expected that. But I was really disappointed with myself because had I been honest that first time, probably would have been easier.
Yeah, never be disappointed in yourself because there's, just the opportunity to even attempt to get a PFA is such a courageous act within itself. That whether it ends up successful or not, the ability to just take that step is something to be super proud of. Because it really is a scary experience. It's not easy. It's a super stressful system to navigate. It's very complex. The reports themselves are not always very trauma informed in perspective of the experiences of those that are standing in front of them.
But I definitely think this experience, like what happened to me, has framed, not framed, but has taught me a lot. But it has opened my eyes to look for signs now, right? So, especially in this role that I'm in now, I interact with people a lot, and you never know when you're going to uncover someone who's in a situation. So there's one incident where I was in Wawa and I saw a young girl with a bruise that just didn't sit right with me. And I ended up like really casually, so I didn't scare her, approach her, just be like, hey, what's going on? Like, do you need any help? I gave her my card. She was like, oh my God, I'm fine. It was like, she explained what happened, but she's like, I so appreciate you checking on me. And then recently, so I do birthday calls every day. And recently I called an older man and he railed about his wife to me, told me about an incident between the two of them, like where violence broke out, and I didn't know how to get him off the phone. And when I finally got him the phone, he ended with saying like, and I'm not done with her. I literally hung up, picked up my other phone, called the police chief of that township and was like, hey, just want to report this. And he knew the name. They went and checked on the wife. Like he was like, thank you so much for calling. We know this couple, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you can't do anything else. You've done your job, but it really freaked me out. I can't stop thinking about it, but I did what I was supposed to do, right? I alerted the authorities and it's in their hands now, but I've become very sensitive to keeping my eye out. So if I ever am asking someone a question, I'm probably just trying to make sure you're okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, like, what do you think agencies like that could do more to make sure that community members know, what we provide? And even I think that with the PFA process, we provide free representation so that if someone is going to get a protection from abuse disorder, they really can be supported to practice as well to make sure that they're presenting the right information, the correct information. Not everyone knows that. So what do you think organizations can do to really make sure?
You remember when we first met, one of the things I was saying was I wasn't very familiar with everything DAP was doing and is doing in Delaware County. So I think you've already in the last year have done so much. That bingo night you guys had was amazing and you've really got the word out. Unfortunately, COVID has impacted your ability to have big events like that. But I think doing things on social media is great. Having events when we can again is great, and just figuring out how to reach out to constituencies. I think the libraries would be a great place for DAP to partner with, because so often libraries are where moms with young kids go, or it's a place that you can go safely if you need to get out of your house and you're not. So I suggest that. I also just think the more you do work with us, we can spread the word, and I think it just helps get I spread the word about your resources. I also have started telling folks about the Delaware County Mobile Crisis Unit, because it's just another amazing program in Delaware County that you can call if you're in crisis. I used them over the weekend to help a neighbor. So I'm trying to, in my position, the best part of my position is the networking and getting to connect folks. So we've recommended people to you guys. And I think another key thing that we need to work on together, and we can get, there's other folks interested, is we know now during COVID, we've seen a rise in domestic cases in law enforcement because people are in their houses, right? We need to figure out a way to have either DAP or other social workers or someone follow up with those families after the police leave, so they can see like what's going on, what led to this domestic case. Is there therapies that can be done? Is there programs that could help this family? Is there undiagnosed mental health illness going on in the house that we can try and work on? Because I know that you're more likely to re-interact with law enforcement when no one intervenes. And we know that with domestic cases, cops are doing their job by reporting to a 911 call, but we could equip either them better or bring people with them or have people follow up to help those families more. So that's something that I've been exploring in my position. We had a hearing a couple weeks ago, and we found out that in Fulton and Franklin counties in Pennsylvania, which granted are much smaller than Delaware County, which way fewer people, they have implemented co-responders into their police departments that do this kind of thing. And they're seeing tremendous results in all different ways. So it's something that I have the DA interested in. I have mobile crisis unit interested in. I have law enforcement a little bit interested in, and I pulled DAP in. So it's something I'm working on. But of course, COVID is just sort of sidetracked everything. But there will be a time after COVID where we work on things like this again, hopefully soon.
I just got an alert that I sound robotic. Can you hear me okay, Jen?
I have been able to hear you, but it's like I've been needing to listen carefully to.
So Nicole, you're still on, right?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to log out. Nicole kind of questioning, and then I'll type back in. Are you good, Nicole?
Yes, so we're going to just continue with the questions. So we appreciate you responding and saying things that we have done well as an agency, in addition to the things that we can continue to do. But were there any agencies or resources that helped you during your time experiencing domestic violence with your partner, in addition to the support system you had with your family and friends?
No, I mean, there really wasn't. And I don't know if that was because I didn't seek it out or if it was because I wasn't aware. But I just sort of dealt with it. And I like I had mentioned, I think Julie asked me a little bit of sort of this earlier. I ended up using a work benefit actually to get individual therapy, which ended up being really good and helpful. And I continued doing it for a little while after the work benefit extended. Because I thought it was helpful for me. But that was just my internal stuff. I still wasn't ready to go talk about it in a big group. Like
Yeah.
I felt more comfortable talking about it in a one-on-one setting.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask as Julie comes back. So you did mention that your experience has influenced how you advocate regarding mental health awareness. How else has this experience influenced who you are now, whether it be with your job, your personal relationship with your husband, so on and so forth?
Well, I think the one thing that I think I took away was when it all ended and then I finally sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back night happened and I made him leave. I felt like not only was I really defeated, but I was in a really bad financial position because he had literally stole so much money from me that I wasn't aware that was happening because he was doing it in small amounts and then it ended up being a big one at the end. That's how I called it. So I promised myself I would never be financially dependent on another person and I would always be set up for myself. Even in my marriage now, our house is in our both names. We have our joint finances and separate finances. And I made sure that I feel independent, even being with another person. And I've learned that that means we are interdependent rather than being codependent, which is a really important goal that I think I've learned to work on in my relationships, and that I think it's important for other people to work on. And that means you don't have to your existence shouldn't rely on your partner, but you both should be successful in your lives and be with each other as you move forward throughout that. So that's been important for me to take out of everything that happened.
And
Guys hear
Julie?
me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yay.
It's all you.
So a follow-up question to that is, how do you think the experience has really impacted your career trajectory and your role as a leader?
It's a great question. Because even me, I think like I said, if you think about where I was in 2014 or even the beginning of 2015, and then if you would have told me April 2015 that I would be elected in November of 2018, I'd be like, you're insane. I think it kind of emboldened me. Like, look, I've been through this. I survived that. If I can survive that, I can survive a campaign. Like, what worse are you going to throw at me than someone that I physically love attacking me? And so when I decided to run, it was Brad's idea too. And I think that was really key. And I'm not one to say like, oh, my husband told me to do it. He was relentless, 3 months, relentless, made a Facebook page, like wouldn't stop. And I think he gave me that confidence I needed. Like, I had a partner with me that was going to support me and make it so I could, like, when we realized one of us had to stop working, he quit his job, and that was incredible. But for someone to believe in me enough to quit their job, it made me feel like I could do it. And I also felt like we need more women out there, right? So when I decided women need to be making decisions about women, and when
Yes.
I decided to run, I didn't think I was going to win, but I knew that I could show women, like, if that 27-year-old girl who worked 2 jobs while she ran for office and went to grad school can do this, I can do this. And so that was my mindset. And since being in Harrisburg, I have been asked whose intern or secretary I was more times than I like to count. Drives me insane. And there are a lot of younger women, right? So we recently, this is just like horrible, but the men have a barber on the house floor that they can go get their hair cut. We have nothing like that. Our bathroom was an afterthought when it was added onto the house floor, house chamber. So like the chief clerk comes up to us one day, me and another young female member of the house, and he's like, I want to ask you ladies your opinion. We're thinking about getting something equivalent to the barber for the women. What would you ladies like? And we looked at each other and we were like, nothing. Get rid of their barber. We don't need anything up here. And he was like, oh, I was hoping you would say that. That's what all the women have said so far. And I said, but I do have one request. He's like, what? I was like, can you add pads and tampons to the ladies' room, please? Because there aren't any in any of the bathrooms in this Capitol. And he turned purple. Well, they really are, I think, out in the Capitol, but they aren't on the floor. And he turned so red. And he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. No one ever asked before. Like, he didn't know what to say. I was like, it's cool. Just go ahead. And just a lot more younger women now. Go ahead and add them. He's like, I don't think anyone will use them. I was like, just add them, please. So he did.
Yes.
And they're being used. And it
Oh, awesome.
triumph for me to see that happen. But
That's awesome.
there really isn't enough women, and there really aren't enough young people either. That's another thing I've been noticing. I think I got asked whose intern or secretary I was less because I was a woman and more because I was young, if I'm being honest, which is also frustrating.
Yeah, no, I definitely believe it. I think that as a society, there's so much work to do that we need to do to provide spaces to ensure young women know that there's paths to success and really breaking down those barriers for those that come with stereotypes about what they're able to do or what we can achieve.
And especially
Um,
young women of color, because if I think I have it bad, then we know it's even more difficult for people of color. They make less more. It's just, that was another thing I was thinking about too, was there needs to be more representation in all ways in government. And it starts by actually running and changing who's up there. So, but yeah, who
abs-
still can't believe, it's just crazy to think that this is where I ended up. And I hope that any woman watching this who's going through a tough experience, I hope you know that there's a positive for you at the end. You just have to work for it and make it yourself. Don't rely on anyone else. You're going to do it. And you're going to do it for you.
I guess before we officially wrap up, I know you said a little bit, but any like last messages that you'd really like to share with individuals who may be going through a similar experience as you did, and anything that you'd like to impart upon them?
Yeah. What I would say is, if you are questioning behavior and wondering if it's acceptable, it probably isn't. And you don't deserve that. And it's okay to demand better for yourself. At the end of the day, you have to live with yourself and the decisions that you make, but you're also the only one really looking out for you if you're in a situation like that. So take the situation into your hands and do something about it. And there are people, wonderful people like Julie and Nicole and DAP in Delaware County that can help you. And there's the mobile crisis unit. There are tons of different resources in Delaware County. We are lucky here. We have so many resources that I think one issue we have is trying to figure out how to navigate them all. But there's folks there to help you, and there's a positive future out there.
There definitely is. And I think even in Delaware County itself, there are some just amazing nonprofit organizations that are really doing a tremendous amount to, meet the needs of community members and ensuring that, that needs are being met and that services are being offered. We have, I think, especially in the victim service field, have been fortunate in really being able to also have a DA that's been really super supportive of victim service agencies and very collaborative and very, looking as to what can we do and how can we bring the services to victims in Delaware County to the next level. So I think it's a super exciting time for so many of us in Delaware County doing this amazing work. I know for DAP, we're really excited because October is coming up, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month for us. It's going to be different because we're going to be doing it amidst COVID, but we have some amazing activities that are still coming up. On October 7th, we're going to be doing a vigil up in Upper Darby in the evening at 5:45, and it's going to be at their Municipal Services Building on Garrett Road. And then we're also going to be doing on October 14th from 12 to 1, we're going to be doing a vigil at the county courthouse in Media. And folks, our one and only lovely State Rep Jen O'Mara will be speaking. So make sure you guys come out and you come support. We will have purple ribbons to give out so everyone can put their ribbons on, as well as have some like DAP swag that we're going to be giving out as well. So it should be a nice afternoon of social distancing and mask wearing, but it also just an opportunity to really recognize that there are so many who are impacted by domestic violence, and that we stand up for them, we honor them, and we celebrate their resiliency. So Jen, we celebrate your resiliency, and we're honored for you to be with us on the 14th.
I'm excited.
And I know,
Excited to see people again, even if it's going to be at a distance.
I know. Even if it's at a distance, it'll be nice to just to be out there. And we'll have several members of county council that will be there as well. Our district attorney, Stolzheimer, as well, will be a speaker at the event. So it should be nice and an opportunity really to bring community together, to recognize all those that are impacted by domestic violence, and both those who are continue to be impacted, as well as those that are able to really be resilient and survive.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the 14th, and thank you for having me on tonight. I think this is a great opportunity, and I'm really grateful to have been able to share with you.
Thank you. And we're so grateful for you. And we will see each other soon.
Yeah, I'll see you on the 14th. Bye, everyone.
Yes.
Thank
Good
you.
night, folks. Good night.
Great night.